Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to talk all about the EIR, or the Employer's Information Requirements, and how it relates to the BIM process. We'll explore why it's important, what you need to know, what needs to be considered, and how you go about preparing an EIR. I'm assuming that the audience of this webinar is construction clients or client representatives or advisors, so the message is really targeted at people who may be required to prepare an EIR in the future, but hopefully it's equally relevant to those who have to respond to EIRs. Just briefly about myself, I'm an architect by background. I'm the managing partner of a specialist BIM consultancy practice based in Dublin, Ireland. I also chair and coordinate a number of industry groups in Ireland with a special interest in BIM. Our company, ArcDocs, has been working with a number of project teams over the last 6 years to help implement BIM through providing consultancy advice, BIM production services, support and training. Over this period, we have worked on over 60 projects and trained over 600 people in the use of the various BIM tools and processes. So I hope to bring a little bit of this experience to you today. So as I've mentioned, we've worked on an extensive range of projects over the last 6 years and of various types and scales. So you may wonder, what have we learned over that time? I'd love to be able to say that each project was a dream BIM project from start to finish. But in reality, we found that for the most part, at some stage of the process, BIM has broken down. And the primary reason for this is that there was no clearly defined BIM requirements. So people could choose to opt out of the process, and many did. There was some initial enthusiasm at the start, and obviously those who did use BIM gained some personal benefit. But by and large, there was no significant overall benefit to the project or the client. And I would guess that for many of these projects, the BIM is now sitting on somebody's hard drive or a shelf somewhere and not being used or maintained for the ongoing operations. So as a client, you may wonder, is it really necessary to state your requirements? And you could be asking, shouldn't the professionals that you're hiring know what you want or what to do? I mean, surely they're already using best available industry practice. Surely they are all committed to producing and managing and exchanging information in such a way as to not incur additional cost to you, their client. So what is the problem? And we'll go into this in a bit more detail later, but mainly the problem is that BIM is not the norm yet, and the industry is still predominantly paper-based, using outdated tools and practices. And on top of that, the industry is highly fragmented, with many people and companies involved at different stages of the project, to the point that it's difficult to find one person or one company that is looking out for the client's interests from start to finish. So as a client, you need to be aware that not everybody is automatically going to know what you want, or what they need to do in the overall picture. And so you have to be very specific in asking for what you want, even to the point of stating the obvious, to help make sure you get what you want. So what can you do as a client in this situation? Let's say, remember the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. As the client, you're already paying people to produce information and carry out a design and construction process. So as the paying customer, you should ask for better information, a better process to help get a better outcome. Employers may not be that interested in BIM itself and all the technical aspects, but you should be very interested in what BIM can help deliver. And I won't go through this list, but the words better and improved should stand out and give you a clue as to why you should want these things, because they will directly affect the outcome of your project. So you need to understand enough about BIM to be able to ask the right questions. Let's talk briefly about the things that clients are really interested in. You want to get a building that suits your needs, your budget, and your program. You also want quality. You want good design that reflects your business image, a building that provides a good place for the people that are going to use it. You want good materials and products that will last, and you want a building that isn't going to be too expensive to look after or run. You're also interested in value for money. You don't want to be ripped off, and you don't necessarily want to compromise on what you want or when you want it or how much you are prepared to pay for it. And lastly, you want certainty. You want to know exactly what it is you're going to get, when you're going to get it, how much you're going to pay for it. For most clients, construction is not their core business, so they want their risks to be effectively managed by the professionals they employ. So in short, clients want better buildings, built quicker and cheaper. And you might say, well, is that too much to ask for, or is that even possible? I suppose the traditional response to achieving quality and value is that the process is what it is. So something has to give. The mindset is either you pay more or you allow more time, or you have to compromise on what it is you want. But I would suggest that as a client, another response would be to demand a better process that cuts out the waste that is inherent in construction so that you get more value. And waste occurs at all stages in the design, construction, and operations. And none of these things that are listed here add any value to your project. Some industry groups would suggest that over 30% of the cost of design and construction is waste. So as a client, you really have to ask yourself, do you want to pay for that waste, or would you prefer to convert some of that into achieving more value? And this is really why, as a client, you need to require a better information process that will help drive out waste and deliver value for your projects. So let's look at some of the problems of the traditional approach so you can understand why they are contributing to so much waste. Firstly, we have a very inefficient devices for communicating information about buildings. Paper-based drawings, specifications, reports, etc., that are slow and costly to produce, difficult to coordinate, prone to error, difficult to understand or query or process. At best, you can say these devices are problematic, and it's really outdated practice for the digital age that we live in. On top of that, we have a very fragmented industry, broadly broken down into areas of pre-project planning, design, construction, and operations. But in reality, there are multiple stakeholders that get involved in projects at different times, all of which have their own business goals and objectives in mind, which may or may not contribute to the success of a project. So there isn't really any one person or organization that is overseeing the project from start to finish for the client. And because of this high level of fragmentation, we get a complicated series of transactions of information about the building through multiple document types and applications, where information is stored in paper documents or in people's minds or on personal computers or multiple servers, to the point that the collective knowledge about a building is almost impossible to find or comprehend, resulting in a lot of duplication of effort. And in the end, you receive boxes full of paper documents or thousands of files on a disk, information that is difficult to search or query, that is difficult to maintain, information that will eventually become outdated or even go missing. And so you should be asking at this stage, surely there must be a better way. And clients need to begin to see and appreciate the value, of the information that they are paying for, because that information is going to be required for so many purposes throughout the life cycle of the building. And the quality of that information is going to profoundly affect the performance and outcome at all stages of the project. So while clients may not be particularly interested in the technical aspects of BIM, they need to understand that BIM is going to help move the process away from an outdated paper-based practice and towards delivering digital information that is accessible, searchable, and more accurate than what is currently being delivered. Traditional practice is about producing some two-dimensional drawings and then going out to site to build the project, working out many of the problems during construction. It's expensive and it's wasteful. BIM is almost the opposite. You build your building twice. First, you construct a virtual building in software so that you can bring aspects of the design together in the federated model and make sure that everything works and fits together. And only then do you go out and build it on site. Uh, Making the BIM process a requirement will force the people involved in the project to create virtual models of their aspects of the design before constructing it, and will help reduce some of the expense and waste on site. But BIM is not just about 3D. The models can incorporate the element of time or the fourth dimension to look at the sequence of construction or issues of logistics and safety, to deal with these issues in the virtual environment where it's easier and cheaper to resolve. BIM can also incorporate the element of cost or the fifth dimension, leveraging computers to quickly and accurately count elements for better cost control. Adding the 6D or structural and energy performance data to the model will facilitate the carrying out of sophisticated analysis of the building to help predict the future performance and running costs, and will also allow the team to test multiple iterations and come up with optimized solutions that will reduce construction and operation costs. And lastly, the gathering of vital asset information of all the components of your building in this digital model to transfer this to facilities management software or 7D will also save enormous amounts of time and cost at handover. So clients need to understand and be aware of these aspects of BIM to be able to ask the right questions and challenge their project teams when they are writing their information requirements to make sure they're getting the best value from the BIM process. So hopefully you can see that BIM will facilitate a better process and lead to a better outcome. And the various aspects of BIM, be it the 3D or the 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D, are all going to directly impact on everybody's understanding of the scope, the time, the cost, and the performance, and even the operations of a project that will drive quality, value, and certainty, which brings it right back to what the client is really interested in and wants. If you don't know what to ask for and you don't know what to expect, then you're probably not going to get what you want, because others won't have the same vested interest in the process or the end product. Let's explore this concept of building your building twice a bit further. It's said that construction is the only industry where the first prototype is the end product. Clients need to help change this mindset to see that there's real value in building the building twice, as described, where you can test and analyze and make mistakes and resolve issues in this virtual world and then go out and build it on site. As a side comment, it's been really surprising to us how many people get this backwards, even people claiming to do BIM, where in reality they are building and sorting stuff out on site in the traditional way and then going back to build the BIM afterwards, simply because BIM was a deliverable. There's very little added value in this sort of backwards BIM. So yes, you must build your building twice, but you must also remember to build it virtually first, not the other way around. You may or may not have heard of the famous McLeamy curve, but basically over time the ability to control the costs of a project are rapidly decreasing, while the cost of making design changes is rapidly increasing. And because of the slow and inefficient way in which we traditionally produce building information, most decisions that affect the outcome of the project are being made quite late in the project lifecycle, when it is already quite expensive or difficult to make changes or control the outcome. BIM allows the project team to more quickly produce enough information to understand and test and analyze the design for early decision making, when it's still quite easy and cheap to make changes that will affect the outcome. But clients have to accommodate this shift in design effort in the way that they structure their requirements. Traditional contracts and fee structures are written against traditional practices of pushing out design decisions to much later in the process. Also, if you consider that for every euro spent at design stage, 20 euros will be spent in construction and 60 euros in the operations of the building, you could turn this around and say that for every additional euro that you spend in design stage, allowing more time to get the building information model resolved and tested and analyzed before going to tender, you should gain about 20 euros of value in the construction stage by having a digital model that is coordinated and can be immediately used and queried and analyzed and even updated for assembly and construction. And you should gain about 60 euros in value during the operation stage by having a building that is firstly optimized for performance, but also having all the information that is required for facilities management in a useful digital format. So again, clients need to accommodate this change in mindset to doing more work up front to get more value later. I'm not suggesting that BIM should cost more overall. It should cost far less because you should be reducing the waste. I'm only saying that clients may need to allow more time up front and possibly restructure contracts and fees to suit. So hopefully you're convinced now that the EIR is important. So let's look at what it is and how it relates to the overall BIM process as set out in the PAS 1192 specification. I've really come to believe that the EIR is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, as it is the one document that can drive the process from start to finish, and the one document that all parties have to respond to, be you designer or contractor. It also has to be generated at the start of the project. It has to carefully consider what's going to happen throughout all the stages of the project, and ultimately it has to set out what has to be delivered at the end. So even before a client engages with design teams, they need to know that they're going to use BIM, because they'll have to include some BIM capability questions in their pre-qualification questionnaires. And then, of course, the client's commercial or legal team will have to make sure that their appointments and contracts documents refer to the BIM protocol, which is an addendum that will enable the use of BIM and set out the roles and responsibilities of each party in relation to BIM. And also part of the appointments will include this role of project information manager for both design stage and construction stage, which in turn means that the client will need someone on their side who understands enough about BIM to be able to liaise with the project information manager. The client will also want to make sure that their teams are aware of the implications of BIM for PI insurance, and to provide absolute clarity and avoid misunderstanding, the client will have to set out their requirements in a digital plan of work, which is basically a responsibility matrix that sets out who will create what information at each stage, to what level of detail and what level of information, and how the digital data will be coded and structured and classified and delivered as data drops. So this is currently quite an onerous task, but hopefully this will be made easier by the BIM toolkit that the NBS are currently developing, which is due to be released this year. Then anybody who's tendering for either design or construction services needs to be able to demonstrate that they have understood the information requirements by producing a pre-contract BIM execution plan, complete with BIM capability assessments. And this is their response to the EIR. And to help the client assess these pre-contract BIPs, we would highly recommend that a template is provided for designers and contractors to complete. Otherwise, you'll get a wide variety of responses ranging from a single paragraph to a 50-page document, which will make it very difficult to compare and assess. Then once appointed, the project information manager, who will typically be the lead consultant at design stage, will assemble the post-contract BIM execution plan for design stage, and together with the team, they will maintain that for the duration of that stage. We would also recommend that the post-contract BIP for design stage gets included in the tender documents for contractors, so they have visibility as to how BIM has developed up to that stage. The contractor will then typically take on the role of project information manager for construction stage, and together with their subcontractors will develop the post-contract BIP for construction stage. In the end, the EIR has to carefully consider what is ultimately going to be delivered in terms of information, and how it will be delivered, how it will be used, and how it will be maintained. So we'll cover that in a bit more detail. So I'm not going to go through every heading that has to be covered in the EIR document, because there's already good guidance for this on the BIM task group. But I've listed a few key points to understand and consider. The first is the plain language questions. These are simply a set of questions that you as a client need answered at a particular stage of a project, which will help you decide whether to proceed to the next stage or not. And you need to set out what information you need to be provided by the team in order for you to answer these questions, and how that information is to be provided and by whom. And that ties back to what we spoke about, the digital plan of work. The EIR should be promoting the use of industry and international standards so that your information structures are comparable and transferable across projects and disciplines. And the EIR might even consider the extended engagement of the project team into the operations phase to facilitate a smoother handover and post-occupancy evaluation, or soft landings. And there's some really good information on government soft landings on the BIM Task Group website. So as discussed, BIM can be used for many things, but if you don't specifically ask for a particular BIM use, you're probably not going to get it, because the team wouldn't have allowed for it in their tender price. And if you ask for it later, it will likely cost you much more, and it may even cause disruption to the project workflow if you ask for it too late. So it's important to be very specific. But at the same time, however, you have to be sure that you don't ask for too much, and you need to consider whether the team has the capability or the resources or the technology to deliver these uses, or what's involved in getting these resources together. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. I ask clients why they aren't asking for BIM, and they typically say they don't believe project teams are ready to deliver. And then I ask the project teams, the designers, the contractors, why they aren't using BIM, and they typically say because nobody's asking for it. So I think clients have an important role to ask for BIM from the start, and once it's clear as to what's required, I think teams will make a plan to deliver. When writing the EIR, you really need to consider what information you want in the end. I mean, what data are you going to receive? What are you going to do with all this data? Is it going to be shelved and left to degrade or deplete, or are you going to actively use and maintain the information, or will you get others to update the information for you? What format do you or others need the information to be in order to use it and maintain it and update it? And there's no easy answers here. As a client, you really need to discuss this with whoever's going to operate and maintain the building, or if that person or party isn't available, at the very least you should specify an industry format that will be acceptable to future operators. But the main thing is that you want accurate, structured digital data, not just paper. The next question to consider is how and where is all this data going to be stored at each stage? Who will have access to this, and how will it be managed and tracked and audited? Will you as a client provide a common data environment for the project, or will you leave this to the project team? How will data be transferred from stage to stage or system to system? The point is, if you don't think about these things and you're not very specific about what you want, you'll basically have to accept whatever you're given. And you may find that you have to spend a lot of time and money sorting out and repurposing data at each stage. Again, this is wasteful duplication of effort that you as a client are paying for. Lastly, I want to go through a number of things we've learned and picked up over the years, which you may need to consider when writing the EIR. Some of these are obvious, but you may have to include them as a reference to help drive good behaviors to ensure that you get the outcomes you want. One of the biggest challenges we've come across is people not realizing that they were required to do something in BIM because it was a single line or paragraph in a 100-page document. And then they say after they were appointed that they didn't allow for it, and in doing it now it's going to cost more or cause some disruption or delay, which immediately puts the client under pressure to abandon the BIM process. So in order to avoid this situation or misunderstanding, the client should be absolutely committed and clear in all communications that BIM level 2 to PAS 1192 is going to be used on the project. Traditional practice is also to leave the appointment of contractors, subcontractors, and specialist designers to the very last minute, and then expect those people to start delivering straight away. And in many instances, we've seen contractors executing works on site before that element of the model has been completed or checked against other elements of the model. To counter this traditional practice, the EIR should make it clear that any appointments must allow time for model development before executing works on site, and this equally applies to client appointments. Over the years, we've seen a lot of what I like to call pseudo-BIM, where people produce designs and construction in a traditional two-dimensional way, and then produce BIM afterwards. Not only is this double the effort, but the models don't necessarily correspond to the drawings, which are the contract documents, because they've been produced separately, so the model is not reliable. So the EIR should state that all documents and drawings should, as far as practically possible, be derived directly from the model. Another poor practice we've seen over the years is designers not willing to share their models with the project team, which results in a lot of duplication of effort. In fairness to designers, in most cases, there was no requirement to share their model. And I suppose personally, I shouldn't complain too much about this, as a lot of the production work we do is converting 2D drawings back to 3D models. But from a client's point of view, this is an unnecessary expense and waste of time. So the EIR and BIM protocol should ensure that models are shared in a usable format while protecting the rights and responsibilities of the parties. If you've taken the time and trouble to write an EIR, then you should make sure that anyone tendering on the project for either design or construction services submits the pre-contract BIM execution plan and capability assessment with their tender to firstly demonstrate that they've bothered to read the EIR, but also to show how they're going to fulfill the requirements. As mentioned earlier, it helps if you provide a template for people to complete for consistency to make comparing and assessing these easier. This is one of those obvious ones, but you need to make sure that the EIR and the tender specifications include for the contractor to provide IT infrastructure on site to facilitate the use of BIM, so that these costs are included in the prelims. Otherwise, the contractor may not provide it and people will revert to a paper process. You want to make sure that the normal submittals and approvals process includes for providing BIM. Otherwise, you'll find that subcontractors simply provide quick 2D drawings to get approval without really resolving anything and then produce the BIM much later. You want to test submittals and any proposed design alternatives in the model before approving them. Ideally, if you want to get an as-built model at handover, any changes that occur during the installation on site should be recorded back to the model. The importance of this will vary from clients or project types, so the tolerances will have to be defined, but you may, for instance, require a 3D laser scan as proof of installation before closing up works, or you may want the model to be updated according to the scan. Ideally, clients should be seeking a digital safety file at handover where the project documentation like commissioning certs and product sheets, etc., should be cross-referenced to the element ID in BIM, and you may even want the hyperlinks to the relevant section of the digital safety file inserted into the object or element properties. As a client, you need to understand that you will have to have someone with enough technical knowledge of BIM to be able to liaise with the project information manager to receive and check data submissions to see if they comply with your requirements, and you'll also need to consider who's going to manage the data post-construction and also get their input into the EIR. If you're managing a building or campus or portfolio of buildings and planning some significant refurbishment or extension, you may consider converting existing information to BIM prior to carrying out design or construction, or you make it a requirement of the project to convert existing data. Since you want any new works to be done in BIM to reduce the waste and improve the process, you'll also want that new element of work to slot into a model of the existing. In some instances, converting existing data to BIM would make sense anyway for the long-term management of a facility and its information, even if no new works are being done, simply because it's quicker and easier to access and manage information in BIM. As a client, you should consider a strategy with regards to laser scanning or 3D point cloud surveys. You may get this done prior to design, or you may require designers or contractors to carry out surveys at various stages before, during, or after construction. The point is that all these scans are valuable information, and you should make sure that you're getting and collecting this data and not paying multiple parties to scan and model the same areas over and over again. It's also important for clients to understand that while a 3D laser scan is not an information-rich or object-based BIM, it is a useful reference when you need to produce BIM later. If you're the type of client that has a lot of repeat work, like schools or hospitals or retail, you may consider developing a set of templates or component libraries or even standard room layouts in BIM, which you can provide to designers to avoid unnecessary duplication of effort across your projects, while at the same time ensuring that the standards of information that you want are embedded and contained in the components. And since BIM isn't mainstream yet, as a client you may choose to facilitate BIM workshops and BIM team training to alleviate the burden on small and medium enterprises that are involved in your project, to help make sure that BIM is being used correctly for your project. You may want to provide or even promote the use of some online collaboration tools that help speed up the resolution of design and coordination. And you may want to provide or promote the use of online site inspection tools that will help drive better snagging and quality and safety inspections. So these are just some ideas of things to consider. I'm sure there's many more. BIM is still evolving, and like everyone, we are also still learning. I'm sure there'll be many other considerations going forward, and maybe in the question time, other people will have other suggestions. So in summary, I hope you're convinced that the EIR is very important, that it's a key document to drive BIM objectives and good behaviors. As a client, make sure you're getting BIM as a process and a deliverable. Be specific about your requirements and even state the obvious, because at the moment BIM isn't standard practice. And in the end, it's all about the information as a valuable asset, and how that information is produced and managed and exchanged will determine the outcome of your project. Thank you. Here are my contact details if anybody wants to touch base, and we can take some questions now.